Last week, I got an email from a reader and viewer on the YouTube channel. They wanted to know how to form a mastermind group. So that's what we talk about in this video today. I invited my good friend, Rob Atkinson, who I'm actually in a mastermind group with, to talk with me about mastermind groups. So we're gonna go into, the definition of a mastermind group. So if you don't know what one is yet, stay tuned. That's the first thing we cover. And then we get into the pros and cons of mastermind groups, because it's not always, a positive situation. And we go into the details of that and how you can avoid it. And then we talk about forming a group, whether you form your own group or find one that's out there, or even join a paid group. I'm Doug Cunnington, and if you're new to the channel, please have a look around and talk about internet marketing and project management. If you like what you see, please subscribe. Hey, what's up? Doug Cunnington here, and I'm with my friend Rob. How are you today?
Good, doing good over here. How are you, Doug?
Pretty good. Like, the snow let up a little bit for today, and I finished shoveling the driveway. So yeah, I'm ready to do some work today.
Nice. We've had sunny skies, been like 60s, 70s the last 2 weeks. So
oh, that sounds nice. We're still deep in winter, so
brutal.
It's all good. The days are getting longer though, so it's good. Now today, we're here to talk about forming a mastermind group, and we're going to go sort of deep in certain areas. We're going to talk about like what a mastermind group is, if you're not familiar, pros and cons of a mastermind group, and some of the harder things are like how to form your own and some of the options you may have out there. I know, mastermind groups have been like integral for my development and growth as an entrepreneur, and even understanding like what I was trying to do. And I think, Rob, you're in a similar position, right?
Yeah, I mean, I joined one like 3 or 4 years ago, and we'll talk about it, but it's been huge.
Great. Now, a lot of people may not know what a mastermind group is. I know when I first started learning stuff online, I had no clue. So I went to the source that I learned from, and that's Pat Flynn of Smart Passive Income. And I'm reading from his website. I'll put a link below, but a mastermind group is a small group of people who regularly meet online or offline to talk about goals, growth, and success, and provide support for each other. I've talked about mastermind groups. This is Pat speaking. I've talked about mastermind groups on the blog before, and just how vital it has been for his businesses. So, that is one of the inspirational points where I was like, oh, I need to form a mastermind group myself and figure out like how to take advantage of this, right? So let's get into the pros and cons. Now, Rob, you have been in a couple groups. Why don't you take us through a couple of the pros here?
Sure. So from a high level, if you're an aspiring online entrepreneur or anything like that, you're probably most likely the people you have been surrounded by from your hometown or whatever. Probably majority of the people don't understand what you're about, what your motivations are, and stuff like that. And I think especially early on or any stage in your entrepreneurial path, it can get really, really lonely. So just to, virtually, hop on this call with you and just chat with you, like this is positive steps, in the right direction. It keeps reinforcing what we're doing, what we believe. So that's probably the biggest thing. First off. The second one, which is really important, is accountability. So I know for me personally, like I get motivated to do things, but sometimes, a couple weeks go by and the same thing just doesn't get done. So both of us have been in the same group in a mastermind since, 3 or 4 years ago. And if you've got serious people that are into it, you put something on and you're going to meet up 2 weeks from now. And I tell you, Doug, that I'm going to do this. Like if everyone's taking it seriously and you show up next meeting and you have to tell people you didn't do it, yeah, it's going to kind of motivate you to not have that happen. It's embarrassing.
Right. Exactly. And if you have the right, people in the group, you end up with, people that'll be tough on you, not like a boss per se, but it's like a boss peer kind of thing where someone could, you're accountable to them to do what you say to have done what you said you were going to do. So yeah, very important. Now, one of the other pros before we move on to the cons, and by the way, we're just going to hit these at a high level. There's many more pros than we're going to talk about, but the interesting thing, and this happened in our mastermind group earlier today. So when you're facing some problem or issue, you're working on something for a long time, you're very close to it and you lose like perspective and the context of, the big picture. So you may be working really hard, you have your head down, and you can't figure something out. So you can go to this group with your issues and problems, and sometimes it is just painfully obvious, especially when someone points it out, and then you're like, oh, I actually knew that, and I was going to do that, or it may just be a complete blind spot. But we all have blind spots like that, and to have people that like understand what you're working on and that can tell you from a good place, not a critical place, but a helpful place, then you could accept that, input and, do something with it.
Totally agree. If you didn't bring up that point, I was going to talk about it.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, you got me today, Rob, and I was like, oh man, like that's the most obvious thing. I've done the same to you where it's just like, oh, did you ever think of, point A and point B, and it solved 2 or 3 problems, like without you having to do extra stuff. So
yeah, it's another set of eyes.
Yes.
Taking a look at a problem from a new perspective. It's huge.
So for cons, I actually struggled to like come up with very many, but Rob, you did. So what do you have?
So there are a few. I think if you are in the wrong group, what I mean by that is if you're surrounded by people that maybe on the surface say they want to do it, but deep down really struggle to take honest and open feedback, their ego kind of gets in the way. Maybe they're just generally more flaky. Not all of them work out. You need good people. So I would say if you start one and you don't feel like there are true benefits and the group's not working, I think it's going to hurt you more to keep going with it than it is to just break off until you find that right one.
Great point.
It's not really a con. It's just be careful.
Right. And that's a great point, Rob, because like I didn't think about that, but I take great care, and we'll talk about forming a group in a second. I really do a lot of work on the front end to make sure it's the right people. And I think it's one of those deals, and we've heard it over and over again, where you become like the people that you're around. So surround yourself with good people. And if you have people that are sort of not doing what they say they're going to do, or they don't take it seriously, or they show up late to meetings or stuff like that, it's going to be a little contagious, and vice versa. If you get people who are sort of stretching, they're doing more, they're doing interesting stuff and pushing themselves, well, then it pulls the whole group up. You put a few people together like that, and it really pushes everybody like harder than they would on their own.
Totally agree.
Yes.
And this is more of a circumstance that could happen. Sometimes it depends also on not necessarily the skill level, but sort of like what the people are kind of good at and what they're focusing on. So like if everyone is good at SEO and they're like very technical minded, well, you don't really have that other perspective. So you can't really choose perfectly who you want, but you kind of want maybe one guy who's SEO but thinks about it this way, and this guy thinks about it this way. I think that's where it becomes super powerful.
Yes. And to that point, I was speaking with some people locally here they're in a mastermind group, and they formed a podcast, whole different story, but they form their groups a little bit differently than us. So we do affiliate marketing and SEO. That's sort of our orientation. However, we all have a different background and a different skill set that we could bring to the table and help each other in that way. This group has an artist, a marketing executive type person, an entrepreneur, and some other thing. It's completely unrelated, and they formed a group. They've been meeting for a long time, and they like that. They like the very diverse backgrounds that everyone has. So for me, I was like, I wouldn't think it would work, right? Because I would come with a problem, and they would be asking like super basic questions that don't make sense, where, the way they work on their group and bring a problem in, they have to, provide the right context. When I start thinking about it, I'm like, if I bring an SEO problem to someone who doesn't know SEO, well, I mean, they can't help you, right? They have to make sure it's the right context of a problem. So they could come in with very broad ideas, but nothing like strategic and very specific. So have you heard of any people that have a structure like that?
No, I haven't. But I think it just speaks to like, you can have multiple groups, and you can have more of your broad stroke group. You can have more of your SEO. Within the SEO, you can have different talents and backgrounds. So you mix and match, you find kind of what works for you. And I think just be careful is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yes. I'm assuming we've probably convinced a few people that mastermind groups are a good thing and they want to be in a mastermind group. So where do you find a group? And I'll start us off. And this is hard, right? Because you hear about mastermind groups and you're like, well, how do I join ones? And that's the thing. Like if you hear about me or Rob talking about our mastermind group, it's closed, right? It's a small set of people that are meeting, and we've known each other for years. We've vetted, each other over time. You're probably not going to be able to get into our group. You'd have to have like a lot of credentials to come in, right? Like we wouldn't just let anybody to come in. So it's super rare to find an opening, but it could potentially happen. And in fact, multiple times with you and I, Rob, we were like, oh, you know what? Like, it'd be great to have another mind in here. You know anybody? And we'll like go back and forth for a couple months, maybe, figure out if we want to add someone to the mix or not, and then go from there. And, we have maybe like once a year, we've added a new person, and there's some churn, sometimes people leave a group or something. So anything to add about finding an opening or an existing group?
I think just continue trying to connect, for example, with people that you follow and peers, and just kind of being active in your community, get your name out there. And, you'll start to form people on Facebook that you chat with or that you have in Skype, and just, you can initiate and be that person that kind of rounds the troops together and can kind of find out if there's a group of people you want to join together with.
Exactly. And actually, like, you're sort of even diving into the next way that I think is probably one of the best ways to get into a group. And that's like networking and forming your own. So I know you're actually a pretty skilled networker, Rob. You want to tell us? Yeah, you are. You're great. What do you think about this forming your own group kind of style?
I think going back to when I first started, I think trying to get people that are above you, like you said, you have to have some credentials depending on the group of people that you're joining. So if you're new, right, to the internet marketing space or whatever you're going into, just try to add value as much as you can. Try to show that maybe you don't have as much success in what you're doing, but you have so many other skills. I don't know, like when we joined, there was someone in our group, we won't name who this was, but I was making a little bit of money with the online stuff. And if you remember, he was making kind of some really good money.
Yeah.
And I think just the fact that you guys are all together on this same path is something in common. So find ways to add value. Just connect with as many people as you can, help where you can, even if it's maybe you don't necessarily know as much as them.
Right. And I think, there's a balance with that, from my perspective, like you weren't making too much money at that point. You were good for Chiang Mai or whatever. You could watch.
I wasn't there yet.
Yeah. So yeah, it was good for Chiang Mai, but you weren't there yet. So we could put links in some of the like dramatic history Rob was going through at the time. Dramatic. So the thing is, like, your revenue was a little lower. Mine was sort of in the medium range. I had just gotten some sites penalized. You were kind of in the same boat. We were trying to recover. The other person was further ahead. But, the interesting thing is we all had a different, like, skill set. So I was like, hey, I'm good with, like, organizational stuff and, project management. And I could help you scale. I can, it's literally, I know how to do. I can hire people and get them to do stuff. Rob, like, you had plenty of experience, and you just got caught up in different areas, and you were hungry, right? There's something where it's like, this guy can't fail. There was no alternative. Like, you were going to make it work, or you weren't going to be doing internet marketing, right? So
that's a really good point. I think, because I try to remember back to like what skills I had. I don't think they were there, but I think people really resonate with hustle and like a willingness to succeed no matter what. So if you're serious, people will take you serious.
Right. And it's always good. And by the way, I know a lot of people may think, hey, I have that hustle and I'll work hard and blah, blah, blah. You came in with proof that you knew what you were doing as well. So I want to point that out. Like, you had multiple sites that were making like really good money, and you just got caught up like any good SEO. You got a site penalized here or there. You had some issues, it's all part of the rite of passage. I think if you have results that you could bring and show and share, like, that's that can get you in the door, even if you are at a place where you don't have that like currently earning.
That's a really good point, just to have some results that you're really, really taking action. If you're just saying you're doing stuff and then you tell people, well, I don't really have anything, that's not going to be very good.
Right. And basically, yeah, if you don't have any results, like it's all execution, right? Like the ideas are pretty easy, you know, it's all like following through and executing on it. So on that, we can move into the next one, which is like, actually, I guess it's all networking and forming your own group. So we talked about the networking, which is the front end. And I'm going to tell you about how I started my first group and got into a group. So I found Smart Passive Income in early 2013, like April timeframe or so. And it was right around the time that the Niche Site Duel 2.0 was coming out. It was sort of like a forum, and Pat Flynn was trying to get all these people jazzed up about niche sites and all that stuff. If people don't know, Pat Flynn got started with niche sites and did like gray hat SEO, just like we got started. So, you know, he's doing different things now, but I just want to make sure people know like it's a good path to start it with niche sites. So getting back to the story, I was like, hey, I want to get into a mastermind group, and you know what? There's this forum here. So I put in a post and I just said, hey, I'm thinking of having a format sort of like this. You know, Pat talks about mastermind groups. I'm starting a site and I wanted to look sort of like this. If you're interested, just send me a private message and we'll work on it. Now, do you remember that Niche Site Duel 2.0 by chance, Rob?
This was before I really knew what was going on. So no.
Okay.
I know what it is. I've looked back
Sure.
after, but yeah, I didn't know at the time.
Okay. Just curious. So, and by the way, in the comments, people let us know if you remember that Niche Site Duel 2.0. Is interested to see like who got started around that time. So anyway, I put out the call and a bunch of people said, yeah, I'm interested, probably a dozen or so. And then when I followed up, I was like, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself. And, you know, based on that, you know, some people just didn't reply, probably like 25-30% didn't reply, not serious. A few others did, and I basically like pulled them onto a Skype call and talked to them, and just, you know, maybe only 5 or 10 minutes, but I just talked to them to see like what they were working on, what they were interested, and I kind of got a feel for like just how they spoke to me and like the ideas that they were, you know, working on, and pulled together a group of 6 people all over the world. It was pretty interesting. We had a couple people that were making like $1 or $2 a day. They were like rock stars to me, funny enough. And I was like, oh man, this guy's so advanced. I remember telling my wife, Elizabeth, that there's like this guy and he has like 3 or 4 sites. And yeah, he's like totally he's making like $2.50 most days, $2.50 most days. So I was just like blown away. So fast forward, we had a couple meetings, people showed up for a few of them, a couple people dropped off, and within 6 weeks, the group evaporated. So I'd already launched like my site by then. Things were starting to step up, and like it turned out of the group of 6, like no one followed through except for me. And I like outgrew all them within like 6 weeks or something like that, which is kind of crazy. But then it just goes to show, this is like getting into like the lifespan of a mastermind group and stuff, but there may come a point, depending on who's in it and like what the goal is of the group, you know, maybe it's just 8 weeks and then you do a bunch of work together and then you finish up and then you move on. That's kind of what this one turned out to be. And yeah, like people just flaked out. It was kind of weird. So I did the reason why I tell that story is I formed the group myself. I learned a lot. You know, I let some people in that probably I shouldn't have, that it sounded like they were hungry, but really they were just dabblers and they weren't serious. Any thoughts on that, Rob? I don't know if I've told you that whole story just like that before.
No, I never knew that. The only thing I would say is, you know, it's probably very similar to dating, I guess. I mean, you can have like an 8-week relationship. It could be good. You can learn a lot. It's going to set you up for the next one. You know, we've been in a mastermind together for 3 or 4 years and we're going steady. So like,
yeah,
I think what we talked about before is like, it really comes down to the strength of the people in your mastermind. That's going to be the ultimate success level of it. And, you know, at the end of the day, if you just had one for 8 weeks, but you learned, that's a success too.
Yep. And like, you know, similar to that, I like that analogy. We'll have to play that out, you know, how we could take it to the next level. Seriously though, I think it's kind of like a job also. Like some people view a job where it's like, you know what, I'm going to work for this company for a long time. I want to go through like this whole corporate hierarchy, which of course you and I rejected that kind of stuff, Rob. But there's another set of people who are like, you know what, I'm going to work in this job for like until I stop learning and then I'm out. Like I will take the skill set and,
right.
You know, go on to the next job. Now, earlier in my career, I thought those people were just bouncing around looking for more money, which is a nice side effect of doing that. But in reality, they were like, not everyone, but some people were like going to a company where they could work under someone, have a mentor in the company, and then they would be able to leave when they learned what they wanted, and then have like a nice network, building their network to move around. You could technically form mastermind groups like that, where you're like, hey, I want to be in a mastermind group for X amount of time and I want to work on this project. It's less of a commitment for people too, rather than like an ongoing thing, you know?
Right. And also people's goals change, right? So like a year after you join, maybe this guy who was doing SEO wants to do something else, and maybe that just doesn't make it work anymore. So
Yep. Exactly. So, and the last option we'll kind of talk about here is like sort of a placement service or like a paid mastermind. So on the placement service, I actually, with other people that I used to be in a mastermind with, we tried to form like a forum style, like mastermind placement service thing. And we just kind of lost steam with it. It was an interesting concept. We actually had a few dozen people that like joined the forum, but we just never got much traction on it and didn't spend time on it. But I know like the Tropical MBA, the podcast and I guess blog, I think they have a paid like placement service sort of situation. And I mean, I think the benefit on that is if you could find one that has been around and has like, you know, some, I guess, case studies where they could show you that they actually have a pool of people they can match you up with, you can be matched up with people that you wouldn't normally meet that are at the right level. So, you know, the second part of that is like there are some groups that are, you know, high-end paid masterminds. Now, I've looked at one before. It's sort of, it never took off. And this was an expensive one, right? It would be, you know, potentially $10,000 to $12,000 and a couple, you know, in-person live sessions. And it would be, you know, vetted people, right? That's the advantage. The only reason I would pay that amount of money is because everyone sitting at the table with you is at the same business level as you. They all paid the same amount of money. And you could assume that if you were interviewed and vetted, they were too, and they're not jerks, right? You don't want to be in a group where people are like not cool. So that's the advantage of doing that. And I think the biggest thing, like from my perspective, is everyone at the table is taking like their business so seriously, or whatever you're working on so seriously, that they'll invest that money and they are serious about it. So Rob, I know before we started, you said you hadn't been in a group like this, but any, you know, thoughts, any observations? Do you know anyone who has done something like that?
I don't, but for all the reasons you talked about, you know, people paying, they're serious. It kind of reminds me, not exactly masterminds, but paying for coaching, right?
Yep.
I mean, you're getting one-on-one feedback from someone. The organic works, but yeah.
For those high-end like paid masterminds, a lot of times if you see, you know, the guru types, although most of those people wouldn't call themselves gurus, but like a Tony Robbins or a Tim Ferriss or, you know, like Ramit Sethi, they have like some higher end like programs that you can go to. And a lot of times they may have a component of like one-on-one coaching. They may have a component of in-person, like weekend or, you know, multi-day like sessions, like a mini conference where instead of, you know, hundreds of people or thousands of people, it's like 4. And, you know, you're in a mastermind group with those people and you meet on a regular basis. The paid groups are completely flexible, right? Like they could do whatever the organizer wants to do. So there may be none of that. It may be all in-person sessions. You never know, but keep your eye out for those. And those are typically, like I said, pretty high end. So
do you ever worry? Because I think a concern of mine with like those is you're paying the money and you just got to make sure that the person setting up, their heart and motivations are in the right place. Do you ever get scared off by the high price tag?
Well, I've only considered it with like one person, and, you know, I've taken another one of his courses and I, you know, generally trust him. You know, a lot of my business that I've created and stuff that I've learned about, you know, marketing and copywriting and stuff is from that person. So there's a high level of trust. Now, you know, the tough part with these is like there's no like refund, you know, courses, there's a refund policy, typically quite generous and flexible refund policy. But with an in-person mastermind, like you book a spot and you start paying high amounts of money right away, or pay it like in full right away. So, I mean, you're in unless there's some sort of like hardship thing and you're able to convince them to get your money back. But I mean, in most cases, it's just like you have to have a high level of trust. So
that makes sense. I guess if you're following someone for that long, I guess the point would be, don't just find something online that says Mastermind and jump in. You probably want to have a good rapport, or at least understanding of who this person is.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. So in the next session, we're going to talk about how to actually run a meeting. So, we'll assume you've formed a group. And by the way, you only need one other person to form a group. So you only need one other person to meet with you and talk through stuff. And in fact, I've had a group where there's just one other person. We had 3 originally, but one person dropped off, and now, that's just 2 people. So,
yep, me too.
All right, cool. Well, looking forward to it, Rob. And I'll put a link so you can see how we run our meetings, and then you can get some other suggestions on, how to improve your meetings and stuff like that. So thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Doug.
Thanks for watching this video, and let me know if you're in a mastermind group. Just let us know in the comments below. Potentially, if you want to join up with some other people, maybe you could find a connection down in the comments. So thanks for watching. Definitely check out more stuff on the channel if you like this, and don't miss the next episode where we go into, Rob and I talk again. We talk about the agenda that you can set for your mastermind groups.